She came to my land smiling, clipboard in hand, pretending to care about mosquitoes. Weeks later, frogs lay dead in my pond, poisoned. My land, my home, under siege. But I had cameras, records, and a plan. She thought I was just some recluse. She didn't know I was watching her back. I always thought the greatest threat to my land would come from time itself, from erosion, from weather, maybe from some bureaucratic oversight in the county records. Never in 100 years did I think it would wear lipstick, drive a white Lexus, and answer to the name Karen. It started like most suburban tragedies on a Wednesday. The kind of sleepy midweek morning when the frogs still croak lazily in the reeds and the mist hangs low over the water like it's reluctant to let the day begin. I was sitting by the edge of my pond, my pride and joy, coffee in hand, scribbling some notes in my wildlife journal. I just observed a pair of spotted salamanders mating. For anyone else, a blink and you miss it moment. For me, practically romance cinema. The land's been in my family since before the subdivision next door had a name. Silver Hills, they call it. Sounds like a retirement brochure. 6 acres of thick green trees, brush, birdsong, and at the heart of it all, a man-made pond my father dug by hand in the 70s, fed by a natural spring. Over time, it turned into an ecosystem of its own. Frogs, turtles, birds, a few curious foxes. And as of last year, a species of rare salamander that I was documenting in hopes of getting the area recognized as a protected habitat. Nothing flashy, no social media, just me, nature, and peace. Until she arrived. Her arrival wasn't so much an event as it was an invasion disguised as hospitality. She came striding through my open front gate like she owned the air, holding a clipboard in one hand and a branded HOA tote bag in the other. Not a knock, not a call ahead, just crunching over the gravel like the earth itself had extended her an invitation. "Hello, Thomas, right?" She beamed like a cartoon politician. "I'm Karen McGrath, president of the Silver Hills Homeowners Association. Thought I'd drop by for a quick hello." I stared at her from the porch, mug in hand, wondering if I'd finally been nominated for local nuisance of the year. "I'm not part of Silver Hills," I said plainly. "Oh, I know," she chirped, walking closer, uninvited. "But your property borders our community and, well, your pond's really quite visible from our walking trail. Some of the neighbors have brought up concerns." "About what?" I asked, watching her shoes sink slightly into the soft ground. "The ducks," Karen laughed like I'd told a clever joke. "It's just that your pond, and I say this with all due respect, has a sort of unmanaged appearance. Stagnant water can be a breeding ground for mosquitoes, not to mention it lowers curb appeal. There's talk." I raised an eyebrow. "Talk among whom?" She gave me that tight-lipped smile people use when they're hiding a knife behind their back. "Oh, you know, the community." "I'm not in your community," I said again, more pointedly this time. Karen's tone didn't change. "We understand that technically you're not under our jurisdiction, yet. But there are precedents for voluntary annexation. We can help you bring your land into alignment with our standards. It would only benefit your property value." "And what exactly are these standards?" I asked. She didn't miss a beat. "No visible algae blooms, maintained water clarity, uniform fencing, no hand-painted signage, and a consistent aesthetic, especially when it comes to visible garden installations and wildlife enclosures. Oh, and the presence of unlicensed outbuildings would have to be reviewed." "You mean my shed?" I deadpanned. Karen ignored the question and instead reached into her tote bag. "Here's a welcome packet," she said, handing me a thick bundle of documents. "It outlines everything you need to know. And we'd love to see you at the next HOA meeting, Wednesday at 7. We'll be discussing this and other pressing matters." She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the gravel, then paused, looking over her shoulder. "Oh, and please consider addressing the noise levels from the frogs at night. We've received several complaints." I didn't answer. I just watched her walk away, wondering if this was a prank. It wasn't. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail. Official letterhead seal of Silver Hills HOA. It began with "Dear Neighbor." The neighbor part crossed out and replaced with "landowner," and went on to demand that I take immediate steps to bring the visible portions of my property into alignment with community expectations. Included was an invoice for a non-member observation assessment fee of $175. I laughed. Then I called my lawyer. Fred Hanley, 60-something, grizzled, excellent taste in bourbon, reviewed my land title and confirmed what I already knew. No ties to Silver Hills, no encumbrances, no shared rights of way. "You're as independent as a damn lighthouse," he said. "Then why are they trying to storm the beach?" "Because HOA presidents like Karen think they're generals in a war on individuality," Fred said. "Ignore 'em." I wanted to, I really did. But something told me this wasn't over. That gut feeling got worse the following week when I started seeing the same silver SUV slowly driving past my property every evening. Once in the morning, too. Windows down, camera pointed toward my pond. Then, on a particularly foggy Thursday, I found garbage. Fast food wrappers, crushed cans, tossed just past my fence. Sloppy vandalism, not a huge deal, but odd. I checked my trail cam footage and caught a figure in a hoodie at 2 a.m., dropping the trash and running. That same day, someone posted on the Silver Hills Community Facebook page, which I had the misfortune of discovering thanks to a former neighbor, an anonymous message. "Unregulated properties are a danger to us all. The pond has become a blight. Maybe it's time for the county to step in." It didn't have a name, but I had a hunch who pressed post. I decided it was time to up my surveillance game. I installed 2 more cameras near the pond, motion-triggered, night vision, the works. And I started logging all interactions, no matter how small. Every vehicle that lingered too long, every suspicious rustle in the trees. Then came the knock on the door. It was a kid. Early 20s, shy smile, wireframe glasses, carrying a small backpack. Said his name was Andrew. He told me he was an environmental science student at a nearby college. Said he'd read about my rare amphibian study online and wanted to volunteer. I didn't have a public project page, but he knew the salamander's Latin name, which gave him some credibility. I figured, what the hell, I could use an extra pair of hands taking water samples and logging readings. I told him to come by on Saturday. He did, and he was helpful, asked good questions, took diligent notes, seemed genuinely interested in the pond's ecosystem. I didn't know it then, but I had just let a fox into the hen house. Andrew came back the next weekend, and the one after that. Always punctual, always eager. The kid had a knack for reading water pH levels and spotting amphibian tracks I hadn't even noticed. I started to enjoy having someone else around, someone who got excited about pond ecology instead of pretending it was a swampy eyesore. But the longer he stayed, the more little things started to rub me the wrong way. He asked a lot of questions, not just about the pond or the species I was tracking, but about my property boundaries, the old storage shed near the edge of the lot, whether I had plans to develop the land or subdivide it into lots. Questions a biology student shouldn't be concerned with. I shrugged them off at first. Maybe the kid was just curious. Or maybe he had ambitions in environmental policy. Hell, who was I to judge? But a part of me, that quiet inner voice honed by decades of solitude and observing animal behavior, started whispering, He's not just here for the salamanders. That suspicion deepened when I found him lingering by my workshop one morning, notepad in hand. When I asked what he was doing, he said he'd just been admiring the old tools through the window. I didn't like it. I told him politely but firmly to stick to the pond and not to wander without asking. He nodded sheepishly and apologized, but something in his expression looked off, like a mask had slipped for half a second. I didn't mention it. Instead, I began playing a different kind of game. If someone was snooping, I'd give them something to snoop on. I cleaned out the old shed and left a couple of empty canisters labeled Aqua Blast, Pond Clarifier, Industrial Grade. They were pristine and harmless. I filled them with water and vinegar. But from a distance, they looked suspicious as hell. I left them in plain sight right near the compost bin. Then I took it a step further. I slipped an old blueprint-style drawing into a plastic sleeve, made it look aged, and labeled it Phase 2, Water Evacuation and Drainage. Then I accidentally dropped it behind a stack of crates near the shed and waited to see if it disappeared. It did. 2 days later. The same day, I spotted Karen's Lexus idling across the road again, half hidden behind a stand of dogwoods. And later that night, my motion cam caught someone, too slim to be Karen, too clumsy to be anyone experienced, creeping around near the compost area and snapping photos. Andrew didn't come by that weekend, nor the next. I assumed the internship had expired, or maybe the ruse had. Then the HOA struck again. A new letter arrived, this one more aggressive. Ongoing violations observed by community liaisons, suspected use of unapproved water treatments, environmental risk to adjacent lots, immediate action required. Attached was a citation, again completely toothless, and a hefty invoice for nearly $500. I didn't even bother calling Fred this time. I just forwarded him the scanned copy with the subject line. Round 2. The pestilence returns. I wasn't laughing, though, because what happened next wasn't petty. It wasn't just Karen flexing her little HOA power play. It was war. Early one morning, while checking water clarity levels, I found the frogs floating belly up, dead. 4 of them clustered near the shallow inlet where the groundwater trickled in. Now I've lived here long enough to know when something is natural and when it isn't. This wasn't from a change in temperature, this wasn't disease, this was something else. And I had a sinking feeling I knew what. I took water samples. I bagged 2 of the frogs and placed them in my cooler. Drove them into town to a lab I'd worked with in the past. Paid out of pocket for expedited testing. While I waited for results, I walked the perimeter of my land 3 times a day. I checked every camera feed, every sensor alert. I found footprints near the northwest fence line. Small ones, light tread, not boot prints. Sneakers. Could have been anyone. Could have been Andrew. The results came back 4 days later. High levels of chlorpyrifos in the water and tissue samples. An agricultural pesticide, illegal for use near aquatic environments, banned in several states, lethal to amphibians in small doses, not something that could have gotten there accidentally. Someone had poisoned my pond, and whoever it was, they'd known what they were doing. It wasn't dumped in the middle where it might have spread slowly. It was targeted, introduced near the inflow so the current would distribute it evenly, subtly, invisibly. I didn't call the sheriff, not yet. Instead, I called a contact at the state's Department of Environmental Quality. A field inspector came out, took samples, and after a strangely brief 15-minute survey, declared there was no significant concern. That's when I knew for certain something bigger was going on, because the inspector was D. St. Ryan. The same name I'd seen in a photo Karen posted months earlier, a fundraiser for HOA-backed urban revitalization. I dug deeper and sure enough found public records linking St. Ryan to a nonprofit grant Karen had administered as part of her Beautify Silver Hills initiative. He was on her payroll. Not directly, of course. That would have been too easy. But close enough to raise alarms. Close enough that he wouldn't see a dead frog if it hit him in the face. At that point, I knew I needed a new strategy. Karen had already crossed a line, and I was certain she wasn't finished. I started planting decoys. I left voice memos near trail cams about installing a draining pump next week. I placed a bag labeled Pond Enhancer, restricted use only where it could be spotted from the tree line. I deliberately left lights on in the shed and powered up a broken well pump to make it sound like something was running overnight. I was setting bait. The cameras would do the rest. The night it happened, I was already watching. It was just past 2 in the morning, that strange dead hour when the woods fall completely silent. No frogs, no wind, no owl calls. I was sitting in my home office reviewing footage from a motion-activated camera I'd hidden behind a rotting oak stump near the southern bank. That stump had been my quiet ace in the hole. Perfect angle obscured by brush with a clear view of the inflow channel. That was where the pesticide had been poured last time. I had a hunch it wouldn't be the last, and I was right. The screen blinked, movement detected. A dark figure crept into frame. Hood pulled up, gloves on. But the person didn't move like someone uncertain. The gait was confident, familiar. They paused near the water's edge, unscrewed a small jug, not a full canister this time, and poured it carefully into the stream. 2 long pours, slow, precise. They turned, and just for a split second the camera caught their face. Karen. Lit briefly by the moonlight, her jaw set, her eyes scanning the trees. No fear, no hesitation, just business. She vanished back into the night, and I sat there, frozen, adrenaline charging every nerve in my body. There it was. No more guessing, no more hunches. I had her. By morning, the pond looked different. The water had a film over it, a subtle sheen, but wrong somehow. Several salamanders floated belly up along the edge. Birds stayed away. The place had gone quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. I didn't need another lab report to tell me what I already knew, but I sent the samples anyway. Then I backed up the footage, copied it 3 times, 1 to a flash drive, 1 to my encrypted cloud, 1 to a hard drive I locked in a safe. The time for subtlety was over. This was a criminal act. I called the county sheriff's department and filed a formal report. I submitted everything: videos, lab results, photos, even time-stamped logs of Karen's past visits. The officer who took my statement was polite but distant, promised they'd look into it. I knew what that meant: sit on it until someone higher up made noise. So I made noise. I contacted a friend at a local university's environmental science program, a guy named Omar, who'd previously offered to collaborate if I found something unique. I asked if he could help confirm a suspicion. See, just before the second poisoning, I'd spotted something unusual near the north end of the pond. A cluster of eggs tucked beneath a rock shelf unlike any I'd cataloged. Omar came out that same weekend. Brought equipment, took samples. We combed the area, studied markings, tracked footprints, droppings. 48 hours later, he called me from his lab with excitement in his voice I hadn't heard in years. "Tom, you've got something big," he said. "Those aren't just salamanders, they're Ambystoma maculatum floridana. That's the Florida strain. You shouldn't even have them this far north. If that population's breeding in your pond, it might be the only known colony outside of its original biome." "Are they protected?" He laughed. "They're on the federal list. You just turned your backyard into a potential conservation site. You have to notify the state." Within 24 hours, I filed a formal request to designate the pond as a sensitive habitat under state protection guidelines. That process would take time. Bureaucracy never moves fast, but it gave me leverage. And leverage was exactly what I needed, because things were escalating again. Andrew reappeared, not in person, not yet, but digitally. An email, no subject line. The message was short, one line. I didn't know she was going to go that far, I'm sorry. Attached was a single blurry image. Karen holding a meeting folder labeled Phase 3 Acquisition Timeline. Inside, visible beneath the transparency of the folder, were maps. My land, parcel lines, HOA proposal documents. He was spooked, and so was I. I replied instantly, told him I wasn't mad, just wanted to talk. Offered to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral ground. He never showed. 2 days later, I got word from a contact at the university that Andrew had formally withdrawn from the semester. Cleared out his dorm, no forwarding address, just gone. Whether Karen scared him off or something worse happened, I didn't know. But his disappearance added weight to the whole damn mess. Then, as if on cue, Karen escalated again, this time publicly. At a community HOA meeting, she made an official motion to request intervention by the county health department regarding adjacent environmental hazards, meaning my pond. Claimed it was a source of airborne pathogens and runoff toxins. She framed it like a health crisis, fear-mongering dressed as civic duty. Of course, someone leaked the motion. A copy of the meeting audio landed in my inbox. Anonymous sender. Her voice was crystal clear. We've already taken preliminary steps. If he continues to resist, the property will be devalued. Once the EPA tags it as a hazard zone, we can push for emergency easement and administrative annexation. He won't have the funds to fight that. My hands shook as I replayed it. She wasn't just trying to poison the pond. She was trying to kill the value of the land, turn it into a liability, force a sale, and claim it under HOA rule. This wasn't just harassment. It was attempted land theft through sabotage and regulatory abuse. I forwarded the audio to my lawyer. Fred called me an hour later. She's screwed, he said. Not yet, I replied, but she's damn close. I loaded up the footage again. The night vision shot of Karen, gloved hand over the water. The moonlight on her face. Clear, undeniable. I smiled, not because I enjoyed what was coming, but because I had finally leveled the field. And now, it was my turn to play offense. When the story broke, it wasn't through some polished PR campaign or investigative news feature. It started with a shaky video shot on a phone, my phone actually, posted with a simple caption. This is what happens when someone poisons a protected habitat. My pond. My land, my home. The footage showed the floating salamanders, the slick sheen of contaminated water, then a few seconds of grainy night vision, clearly capturing Karen pouring from the jug. I kept the clip short, under 90 seconds, just enough to provoke outrage, not enough to spill every card I held. I posted it to a local Facebook group, then Twitter, then forgot about it. 12 hours later, it had over 50,000 views. A day after that, 500,000. Comments poured in like a burst dam. What kind of monster poisons a pond? HOA corruption is real. Arrest her. Give this man a grant. Some called me a hero. Others sent offers. Lawyers, scientists, even documentarians. One guy wanted to come film a podcast episode on the doc. And then the bigger channels picked it up. Local news ran a segment. Suburban HOA president accused of poisoning federally protected pond. They included the full clip, a blurred-out version of Karen's face, and a no-comment statement from the Silver Hills Homeowners Association. But the real wildfire started when a YouTube channel called Suburban Warfare covered the story. The host, some ex-lawyer turned digital crusader, had 1 million+ followers and a bone to pick with HOA overreach. He ran a deep dive, traced Karen's involvement with the environmental inspector, outlined the shady connections, and ended his video with a call to action. We're donating $10,000 to help fund this guy's legal defense. If you care about property rights and environmental protection, now's the time. The floodgates opened. I was getting donations, letters, flowers, packages of frog-themed mugs and hats. One man sent me a carved wooden sign that read, "The pond strikes back." Kids from a local school sent drawings of happy salamanders waving little protest signs. It was overwhelming, and hilarious, and useful. Karen, on the other hand, did not take it well. First came the denial tour. She appeared on a local talk show, airbrushed, smiling tight, claiming the video was misleading and maliciously edited. She blamed activist editing tactics and said the chemicals were part of a routine mosquito abatement service. She even suggested I'd fake the dead salamanders with store-bought specimens. Then came the counterattack. Someone, and I didn't need a DNA test to guess who, began spreading flyers around the neighborhood. They accused me of running an unlicensed research facility and stockpiling hazardous materials. One flyer showed a photoshopped image of my shed with barrels labeled toxic waste, all glowing green like a cartoon villain's lair. A new anonymous Facebook page appeared, Stop the Pond Man. It claimed I was mentally unstable, a hoarder, a recluse with violent tendencies. One post cited fake police reports from the early 2000s. Another claimed I'd been caught nude in the woods chanting to frogs. I'll admit that one made me laugh. But the damage was real. A few neighbors started avoiding me in town. My mailbox was smashed one night. Someone threw a dead fish at my garage door. So I escalated. I filed a formal defamation complaint with the county, attached copies of the flyers, screenshots of the posts, and a statement pointing toward the obvious. That this was retaliation by Karen McGrath, whose actions were already under criminal review. Then I got a call from a local journalist, the real kind, from a respected regional paper. She'd been following the story and asked to meet. We sat by the pond. She asked pointed questions I answered carefully. I showed her the reports, the lab results, the designations, the emails from the state confirming pending protective status. She asked about the flyers. I handed her the best one, the nude frog chant special. She burst out laughing. 3 days later, her article hit the front page. HOA president faces firestorm after pond poisoning. Victim turned local hero. The piece was sharp, fact-checked, damning. Karen tried to strike back again, of course. She released an official statement accusing me of weaponizing media for personal gain and demanding an immediate review of adjacent properties for environmental code violations. That backfired. Because just as her statement went public, a second leak landed in my inbox. Another recording, another anonymous sender, this one from a private HOA strategy meeting. Karen's voice again, frustrated, angry. We were supposed to bleed him out slowly, bureaucracy him into surrender. Now we're getting hate mail from kids with frog backpacks. This wasn't the plan. Another voice asked, Do we back off? Karen, No, we double down. I forwarded the file to Fred. Still think she's screwed? I asked. She's about to learn what being buried alive in discovery looks like, he said. That night I sat on my porch. Fireflies blinked over the pond, and for the first time in weeks I felt the air shift. The tide was turning. The courthouse smelled like floor wax and stress. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Fred, watching as Karen entered in a crisp beige blazer, chin high, fake pearls in place. She didn't even glance at me. Her lawyer, a smirking man named Whitlock, who looked like he got dressed from a yacht catalog, followed behind, briefcase in hand. expression already halfway smug. The courtroom was full. Local reporters took up the front rows. A group of environmental activists sat near the back, one of them wearing a hoodie that read Team Salamander. Someone brought a stuffed frog. Another had a sign that said, HOA, Habitat Obliteration Authority. The judge told them to put the signs away, but not before everyone read them. We were suing Karen McGrath and the Silver Hills HOA for environmental destruction, defamation, attempted fraudulent annexation, harassment, and conspiracy. We also filed a separate civil complaint against D. St. Ryan, the now infamous environmental inspector who declared my poisoned pond harmless and accepted funding funneled through HOA projects. Karen's side argued it was a misunderstanding. Routine mosquito treatment misinterpreted by a reclusive landowner with a personal vendetta, Whitlock said in opening arguments. Fred stood up and said, "We have dead salamanders, video footage of chemical dumping, falsified documents, and a folder labeled Phase 3 Acquisition Timeline. What we have is a criminal strategy with a cardigan." First witness, Omar, calm, professional, and devastating. He walked the court through the biology, how the Ambystoma maculatum floridana wasn't just rare, it was federally protected. How they weren't native to this area, which made their presence in my pond biologically extraordinary. He described the chlorpyrifos in the water, the deaths of the frogs, the destruction of their eggs. Second witness, the tech specialist who confirmed the video's metadata. No tampering, original file timestamp intact, GPS verified. Then came the big one. We played the footage. Karen's face lit by moonlight, the glint of the jug, the pour, her scanning the area, the slow exit. The room fell silent. I looked over and saw Whitlock whispering to her, jaw tight. She didn't move, just kept staring at the screen like she was trying to will it away. Fred stood. "Let me be clear. This isn't some HOA gone overboard. This is strategic environmental sabotage with financial and legal motivations against an individual who refused to bow to pressure. The intent was to devalue the land, remove resistance, and seize it. By force, if necessary." We presented emails recovered from HOA backups, showing Karen's plan to present the land as a health hazard and force emergency annexation. Her words, "If he loses state protection, he'll have to sell. We'll own it by Christmas." They tried to counter, claimed the footage was taken out of context, said Karen was pouring diluted vinegar as part of a natural mosquito control initiative. Fred responded with lab reports showing pesticide residue, records of purchases, GPS tags matching delivery dates to Karen's residence. Then came Andrew. No one expected him to show. He appeared in court, pale and anxious, accompanied by an attorney of his own. Said he'd been scared, but after seeing the video go viral, realized the truth had to come out. He testified under oath that Karen had hired him, unofficially, to pose as a student and report back on anything damaging or useful. She'd instructed him to gather evidence of hoarding, toxic storage, and mental instability. "I thought it was about environmental safety," Andrew said, voice trembling. "But she didn't want to protect anything. She wanted to destroy it, to break him down so she could take the land." He handed over his notebook, filled with her handwritten notes, meeting outlines, strategy points. Her handwriting, her initials, dates, the whole playbook. The courtroom was dead silent. When Karen took the stand, she tried charm, then indignation, then she snapped. "I was protecting the neighborhood," she shouted. "That pond was a disgrace. It was full of slime and bugs and frogs screaming at night. It lowered the value of everything around it." The judge interrupted. "Ms. McGrath, are you saying that justified environmental poisoning?" "I didn't poison it," she barked. I wanted it cleaned up. I warned him." Fred leaned over to me and whispered, That's a confession. Verdict came 2 days later. Karen was found guilty of environmental destruction, criminal trespass, and defamation. The HOA was held liable for conspiracy, property interference, and fraudulent annexation attempts. Inspector St. Ryan was sanctioned and referred for federal investigation. His license was revoked. Damages? $380,000 in direct compensation to me. Another $210,000 paid by the HOA for legal fees, restoration grants, and punitive damages. Karen received 8 months of community service and 2 years of supervised probation. She was also banned from holding any HOA-related office for life. Fred bought a bottle of good bourbon. We drank it on my porch, watching the pond glimmer in the sunset. "Hell of a fight," he said. "It's not over yet," I replied. "Because justice is nice, but revenge takes time." The land was quiet again, not just silent, not just lacking noise, but quiet in that deeper way, like the forest itself had exhaled. For the first time in months, the tension that had wrapped itself around my property like barbed wire had finally loosened. Even the pond seemed calmer, clearer. The salamanders were returning. It had been 6 weeks since the verdict. I was still getting used to life without a legal noose around my neck. The media circus had mostly moved on, save for the occasional blogger or local camera crew trying to do one last piece. I turned most of them away, but the scientists, they kept coming. Omar came back first, along with 2 researchers from the Department of Wildlife. Then came a grad student with big glasses and a GPS tracker who set up a small sensor near the inlet. A camera crew from a nature conservancy arrived with a drone and a proposal to do a short documentary called The Salamanders of Silver Hill. I let them in, with one condition: no footage of Karen, no shots of the neighborhood. The story wasn't about her anymore, it was about the pond. The application for protected status had gone through faster than expected, thanks to public pressure and the state biologist's glowing report. As of last week, my land was officially registered as an ecological stewardship zone. Not quite federal protection, but enough to keep developers and HOA vultures at bay. Permanently. Funny thing about being labeled environmentally critical, it makes it very, very hard to rezone you for tract housing. I received a grant, modest but meaningful, to help fund restoration efforts. I used it to rebuild the dock, reinforce the natural barriers, and commission new signage that explained the habitat to occasional educational tours. Local schools started calling, asking if they could bring students to visit. Some of the same parents who'd once signed HOA complaints were now sending permission slips. Silver Hills changed too, though not by choice. The HOA went through a full audit. Its charter was revised, power decentralized, internal checks introduced. Karen's name was struck from all documentation. Several board members resigned before the ink dried. One of them, a surprisingly honest woman named Mrs. Caldwell, approached me at a hardware store offering a quiet apology and a bag of organic mulch. "I voted against you at first," she admitted. "Now I just feel stupid." I told her it was fine, that people follow what they think is order. It's only when order becomes tyranny that problems start. As for Karen, well, she moved out of Silver Hills 2 weeks after sentencing, sold her house at a steep loss. Apparently her name had become a bit radioactive. Rumor had it she tried to start over in a gated community 2 counties over. But once the story caught up with her, she disappeared from public view. Someone sent me a grainy photo of her cleaning trash along the side of a highway in a safety vest. I didn't post it. It felt too easy. Besides, I had better things to do. I'd started a fund, a small nonprofit, aimed at educating landowners about their rights when dealing with HOAs and private neighborhood pressure. We called it Free Range Foundation. Our tagline: because your backyard isn't their business. Fred helped me set up the legal structure. He even gave a guest lecture once, standing in front of a group of wide-eyed homeowners waving a copy of my case file like it was the Constitution. I hadn't expected to become an advocate. I just wanted to be left alone with my frogs. But sometimes when someone kicks down your door, the best revenge isn't slamming it shut again. It's building a damn bridge and letting others walk across. The pond was thriving. New plant growth along the eastern bank. More frogs. Birdsong returned. The trail cams showed a bobcat one night. I named him Frank. Life was loud again, but in the right ways. I still had the video of Karen tucked away on a password-protected drive. Not because I needed it anymore. Not because I ever planned to use it, but because some things you just don't erase. Not out of bitterness. Out of memory. Last Saturday, I hosted a frog festival. I'm not kidding. It wasn't my idea. I'm going to blame the school district. One of the local science teachers reached out asking if their 5th graders could do a pond day. Somehow that morphed into Silver Hills Amphibian Awareness Weekend, which turned into Ribbit Fest once the kids got involved in naming things. So there I was, standing in front of a makeshift banner strung between 2 trees, holding a thermos of coffee and trying to explain salamander mating habits to a group of 12-year-olds while someone grilled hot dogs 20 feet away. And it was great. The pond looked incredible, crystal clear, teeming with life. Signs marked the boundaries of the habitat, and one clever kid had made a cardboard cutout of Commander Croak, a fictional frog superhero who fought HOA injustice. I didn't know whether to laugh or start a trademark application. Fred showed up late, wearing a t-shirt that read, "HOA this Karen." He winked at me, sipped his beer, and offered free legal advice to anyone with a backyard and a grudge. Even the new HOA board sent a representative, a young guy named Miguel, who brought a donation and said, "We're working on being better neighbors." I believed him. I even invited him to feed the turtles. But the best moment came near the end. A little girl, maybe 7, big glasses, frog plushie in hand, tugged on my jacket and asked, "Is it true your pond beat the bad lady?" I knelt beside her and said, "No, sweetie, it's not that simple. We beat her. The pond just reminded us what's worth fighting for." She nodded solemnly, then handed me a sticker that said Salamander Defender. I still have it. It stuck to my truck. That night, when the crowd thinned and the grill cooled, I sat on the dock, bare feet in the water. A slow sunset dripping gold across the surface. Birds called from the trees. In the distance, I heard the faint croak of frogs starting their evening symphony. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a man defending his land. I felt like someone who belonged to it,